when I was very young, I will tell you, I want no part of sex crimes prosecutions. I think they're vitally important. Hats off to those that do it. But I remember I was second chairing a sex crimes prosecutor who's tremendous, the first assistant there. And it was early on, and the guy was a police officer. And when the jury acquitted the guy, it's a swearing match, I didn't do it. And he comes in as a detective, and I never did this stuff. When we came back, and I see that kid's eyes fill up with tears, and back in the victim witness room, and he said, "Are they saying it didn't happen?" And we're, what do you say to that? And he was, I don't know, about 10 years old, and he said, "I don't care. I don't ever want to see him again." And his eyes he's just devastated. And I hated that.
Welcome to Game of Crimes. Boy, Murph is in for a surprise this week. Two Midwest farm boys, good God-fearing, rifle-carrying Christian farmer farm boys, are ganging up on you, Murph.
Oh, I know who the one is. Who's the other?
Brian Surber. He's going to be our guest this week, but we're going to talk about him in a minute. Hey, guys, everybody, welcome back. This is going to be another fun episode. I am Morgan Wright, your host with the most hair, all that good stuff. Literally here with my partner in crime,
Murph. Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you with us.
Yeah, hey, and look, this is going to be a good one. But before we do that, let's just get through our quick housekeeping that we always do because it says it in the script. So head on over to Apple and Spotify. Give us those 5 stars. We really appreciate it. Your comments. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you want to see changed. But either way, we hear about it through the Apple and Spotify reviews. Just head on over there. Also, head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got everything there. We got our book list, our merch list. And in fact, any pictures that go with this, we always put it up on the episode page. And we've got a book we're going to talk about this week as well. And also follow us on social media at that thing they call social media, at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. But I'm telling you where you got to be. You got to be over on our Patreon channel. And let me tell you why, Murph. I know you're interested, right? You want to know why?
I was curious why.
Right, here's how to order. Here's how you do it, right? Because we've got a lot of good stuff coming out. We had just put out episode 14 of the Real DEA Narcos, talking about the Real DEA Narcos Cali edition, the 15th and final installment, a 2-hour epic episode is coming out in the end. And this is where we tie everything up. And I'm telling you, folks, between what we did with you, Murph, and JP on Pablo, what we did with Chris Feistel and Dave Mitchell on the Cali Cartel, you will not hear this detail anywhere. Not books, not movies, not podcasts. There's only one place you can find it, and that's here. And we do stuff too, like we analyze 911 calls, find out if people are being truthful or deceptive, what's going on there. We've got our narco meter where we review your movies that you pick, and we give you our in-depth review. And our case of the month, last month we did the one about the 6 shootings out in California, the influence of the cartel, what's been going on. So that was interesting. And then, if you are at our Warden of the Throne level, we do a special video time just for you guys. So all great stuff. Visit us at patreon.com/Game of Crimes and, share one, tell one, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And just remember, folks, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We take the story seriously, but
we never take ourselves serious. We're going to have some fun.
And one of the ways to have fun is head on over to our Game of Crimes fan page run by our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato. She's connected to the mob because her name ends in a vowel, especially an O. Soprano, Salvato, hey.
And whatever you do, don't make fun of her accent.
Don't make fun of her Jersey accent. All right. Just to answer a couple easy questions. If you are deemed worthy, you can go behind the curtains and have all the fun with us. So head on over to Facebook, look up Game of Crimes fans, and you will be entered into that. But before we do that too, Steve, we kind of been changing things up. We were doing small town police water, but now we do what we call Case of the Week. We're just talking about something that's popped up and give a couple of our tidbits thoughts about it. So you ready for it?
I'm ready.
So one of the most famous faces on true crime, and when you think of Dateline, who's one of the people you think of that reports on true crime?
No idea.
Keith Morrison. What do you mean, no idea?
I don't know who that is.
Keith Morrison. He's got that very poetic sing-songy voice and that thing about Pam.
Yeah, the white-haired guy.
Yeah. So you know who he is.
I just didn't know his name.
Well, but this is something you and I have talked about before, and this is one of the reasons why we like to do first-person interviews. People who were actually there, people who did it, not people who read about it, not people who researched it and wrote a book about it, even though many of our guests have wrote a book because they were there. But we talk about, people who are just, who report the bad things that happen to other people. And so Steve, I came across this article and I thought it'd be good just to talk about real quick. Dateline's Keith Morrison admits he struggles with the ethics of reporting on true crime. So it was interesting. He said it's a staple of the network, NBC's Dateline, having been on the air. Now, I didn't realize this for 31 seasons.
Wow. I didn't either.
It was a general news program, but today it reigns. It really is. It's like it's top of the game. It reigns as the king of true crime, even in a market that has arguably become oversaturated. I kind of agree with that. Between many of the true crime podcasts and documentaries, Dateline has still managed to carve out a large space for itself. And, one of the things about Dateline is Keith Morrison. Of all the correspondents, here's what the New Yorker said. They described Morrison as the most verbally gifted of them all due to his poetic nature. The outlet added, he seems to revel in the form, and we in turn revel in him. His podcast series, including Killer Roll, feel like a chance to float around in the warm bath of his voice. So, but here's the thing he struggled with, and this thing we struggled with too on During Our Stuff. He says, with the rise of true crime shows, Morrison revealed that he understands his perspective and even struggles with it. Here's his quote. I sort of had to be dragged into the murder business. It just didn't seem right somehow. We were taking these intensely affecting, deeply personal incidents in people's lives and making entertainment from them.
Right. And that's the only ethical thing I could come up with, because everything else is you just report the facts, you report what you have, and let people make up their own minds.
Yeah, I mean, so how do you balance with the need to want to tell a story? And because if it's not entertaining, people don't want to listen. And for some reason, why are murders some of the most fascinating things? I mean, some of our stuff deals with murders, but some of our stuff deals with sexual offenses. Some of our stuff deals with human trafficking. Some of our stuff deals with drug cases, and so we kind of cross the border. But for some reason, it seems murders and true crime stuff is what everybody seems to gravitate to.
Well, and I think the difference between us and Keith is, we're bringing the heroes on the show here to tell their own stories, and our purpose is to present law enforcement the way they really should be viewed by the world, that they're just out there trying to help people, protect those who don't have the means or the ability to protect themselves, and show the sacrifices and the dedication that's involved with true law enforcement professionals. So I think that's, it's not that we highlight crimes, we highlight the people that are out there doing the job more than what they do on Dateline.
Yeah, and he talked about a little bit more. He said he does worry about the exploitative aspects of the crime. He said he recalled a time when he had to drive up to a widow's house just shortly after her husband's passing, recalling that he felt like the worst person in the world. Yet what he found surprised him, for she invited him in, gave him food and drink, chatted with him. He told the LA Times that this was when he realized that the show had the power to allow ordinary people to tell their stories. Maybe the way Keith's doing it a little bit different. The thing that just irritates the holy piss out of me is when you get these reporters right after there's been a terrible tragedy, a shooting or whatever, and they want to go visit them because to them, people who are crying on camera is gold. How does that make you feel? What do you think? What do you want to say to the person? I can tell you it's the standard stock. What do you want to say to the person who killed you? What should we do about this? I mean, they don't care about telling the story. What they care about, I think, is ratings. And I think storytelling, of course, he's after it for the ratings, but I would prefer to hear a story and walk through the stuff, and interview everybody, as opposed to sticking a microphone in somebody's face and going, how does this make you feel?
Man, I am with you so much that we see it every day. The media will sensationalize anything to bring in more viewers, which results in more advertisers, which brings a larger profit to the stations and the networks. And if it's a slow news day, then they'll sensationalize the weather. If there's no tragedies,
can falling rain kill you? Tune in at 10.
Yeah. When it was getting cold here in Florida, well, it's winter. It gets cold in the United States in winter. Not so cold here in Florida.
Just got to watch for those falling iguanas, the falling lizards, or whatever they are.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
Don't pick them up. They're going to be fine. Just leave them alone.
Yeah, but just a perfect example. And this isn't true of all news networks, all media networks, but it seems like the vast majority, it fits the bill for them.
It does. Well, I'll leave you with this last part. What he says that dealing with the subject matter every week is exhausting as the travel, but in the end, he says it's worth it. You get involved in the details and you talk to the people involved and you hear what the real issues are behind the stories. It's so interesting that you can't possibly stay away from it. Well, maybe.
It is interesting. People do want, today's age, everybody wants to know what's going on. They want to know what the top secrets are of the United States, what our nuclear arsenal is all about, and all the other crap that goes on. It's like,
hey, wait a minute, Steve, have you checked your garage for classified documents? Have you looked in your house for classified documents? Do you have any classified documents you're in possession of you would like to admit on this world famous, globally renowned podcast?
I have no comment, Your Honor.
No comment. I know nothing. I know nothing.
I tell you what, if you're a politician and you're not checking to see if you've got classified documents, you're an idiot.
No, here's the other thing, too. If you're a politician and you're checking for classified documents, you're an idiot just simply because of the fact you're checking for it. Those things never should have left
right.
What they call the SCIF. It's pretty marked. It's marked TS, SCI, TK, no form, whatever it is. You got the headers on there that tell you this thing is classified. It stays in this room. Don't do a Sandy burglar and stuff in your underwear or your sock and walk out and say, oh, it was inadvertent. There's nothing inadvertent about removing, no matter what party you are, there's nothing inadvertent about removing classified material from a secure location.
If you and I did that, we would be charged. Yep.
Dude, we'd be perp walked. We'd be in orange.
There you go. Enough bitching, right?
All righty. All right. That's into the reading for today. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we got to get to this now. Let's get to this next part, Steve, because this one's a good one. Good, God-fearing, right-bring, rough-carrying Christian farm boy from the great Midwest, Brian Surber. And again, our buddy Wayne Stinnett hooked a brother up. He hooked us up.
Oh, man. And I got an email I got a text message from Wayne last night. He's already got another one for us. Love it, Wayne. Keep them coming, brother.
So, well, hey, I just teed you up, Murph. So tell us about Brian Surber.
Well, here's a guy who, as you'll see, is rather energetic. He knows how to set his sights on a goal and achieve that goal. Got into school, decided to become an attorney, hanging out with the cops, realized he liked being a cop. So he went to be a cop. So now he is the deputy director of Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, right? I think I got that right, Brian. I hope I said it right. And I had the honor, Hummer and I had the honor of speaking to the Association of Oklahoma Narcotics Enforcement Officers the first year of COVID. It's one of the few places we traveled that year. These guys treated us like family. They treated us like one of their own, which is what I love about the law enforcement culture. The biggest thing that you hate or not hate, but you miss when you retire from law enforcement is the camaraderie that goes along with it, because it truly is a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And these guys invited us in with open arms, and that friendship has continued now. And, we got Brian. You're going to love his story here on some of the stuff he talks about, some of the crimes that he's been involved with that he solved.
No. He was not involved with any crimes. He worked on them.
I'm letting y'all figure that out. You'll have to listen to the show to see what I'm talking about. See, that's a tease to get you to listen more.
Yeah, that's right. No, he does say something we have to clarify as it relates to crime.
So this was an exciting interview. I wasn't real sure how I was going to go with a former prosecutor, but I loved it.
He's fun. It's good. Let me tell you what. He was a lawyer, was an agent lawyer, and now back to kind of agent running the stuff. But let me tell you, he's also got a book out too. We're going to talk about this too. Injustice for All, and in parenthesis, Familiar Fallacies of Criminal Justice Reform. It was just released just recently, I think within the last couple of years. We're going to talk about it on the show. But Murph, we can't talk about anything and discuss the tease that you talked about until I ask you the one question. Are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous, and Midwest-friendly game of all, the game of crimes?
Yes, sir. Let's get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. We're here to listen to Brian Surber, and I have one message for you, Brian, and that's go Mountaineers.
All right, guys, this is going to be good because Murph's going to be a bit uncomfortable because we got a good Midwest farm boy. Unfortunately, he's from Oklahoma, but which, by the way, Kansas State beat, but pretty much everybody else beat this year in football. So, but hey,
well, listen, whoa. We're talking about football. We'll talk about the shirt I got on. Who won the championship this year? They won last year.
You got to buy the shirt. You got to buy the shirt with your own money before we mention it.
Connie went out and bought this. She actually bought this shirt, believe it or not. So I'm into free T-shirts, Brian.
But you didn't buy it. Well, let's talk about our guest first, Brian Surber. So Brian from Oklahoma. Oklahoma is okay. Welcome.
I appreciate that. Now, I'll tell you that I am an Oklahoma State alum. I went to law school at OU, but I still bleed orange. And as for Murph, it's not fair. I mean, hell, when you've lived in 15 states, you just get to pick whichever one is a winner. And
that's right. I got two things to say. One is go Dogs. Sorry, Sandy. And the other is go Mountaineers, which has got beat by everybody in the conference this year, I think.
Except Oklahoma State.
Well, we had one in there, right? I was talking to Wayne about that. And for our listeners here, Brian was introduced to us by Wayne Stinnett. You've heard us mention him before. I think you guys might have a little experience together out there.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to meet these guys prior to COVID. Javier and I went out and spoke at the A1 conference. I'll let you explain what A1 is because I'll screw it up.
Yeah, first met Steve and Javier. A1 is it's an acronym for the Association of Oklahoma Narcotic Enforcers. And so Wayne right now is the immediate past president. Now, when you came out there, I was the president, so I've been just out of the leadership in that. But the A1 has been really just my time there on the board, and ultimately becoming the president was just really one of those things that was really a very rewarding thing.
You don't get confused with the steak sauce when you say you're with A1?
Well, you don't. And
Heinz 57, are we going to mention them at all? Or what?
That's exactly right. Well, everyone has all the different acronyms they have for all these state associations that we all kind of know. And so there's a lot of them just have the CNOA for California, ANOA for Arkansas. And we just kind of we put association at the front to kind of give us our own little acronym we want to have.
I was just thinking we actually did that the first year of COVID because we came out to your office, but pretty much everybody was done virtually, right?
Yeah, and if you're an Oklahoma football fan, it's AA.
Yeah, that was the 1 year that I was the president, and everyone was kind of canceling. And we actually had two venues moved. The venues kept canceling on us. Everybody, this is in August, wanted some training. So we switched and did ours virtually, did it off of a webinar platform. We had some people, I kind of wanted, I think in doing kind of the Zoom when you're just talking to a screen, I've presented and talked like that. It just has a weird feel. And so I kind of wanted to look like a YouTube video of actually someone giving a lecture. So we had live audiences there of some of the officers and then broadcast it out. And that was our biggest conference ever. I think we had 1,500 people that actually attended that year. And so
but it's virtual, Murph, so they cut that in half because nobody has to travel.
We did. We actually traveled during COVID. That's one of the few times that Javier and I have traveled somewhere.
Yeah, and that's another thing we did is rather than have people present virtually, we actually kind of flew them in just to kind of give it that feel. So it was
to infect humor, so you would take it back and infect other people. At that time, probably why I got sick was because of you, pal.
But you know what it was is they were looking around. They're like, who are the idiots who we could get to fly out here? Oh, Murph and Javier. Let's call them.
Who are the fools that would fly all the way out here to speak to an empty room? Yeah.
Yeah, two guys whose immune systems are probably so great, COVID was no threat to them. And so,
I'll tell you, after you drank most of the shit Murph did, and I know JP did, aguardiente and with the other stuff, I don't think there's anything that's going to bring you down, man. The only thing it's going to be is a gator or that damn dog up the street from your neighbor.
I think when I die, I'll be pickled. That's what I'll be.
Well, hey, let's start with you, Brian, as we always do. Think of ours, Cosa Nostra. How did you get started in this? Were you just drunk one night hanging outside the Arkansas football, locker room and deciding you wanted to be a Razorback, and somebody said, no, stay in Oklahoma and be somebody?
I wish I had this kind of early calling. But this has been a profession that's been a blessing. But so for me, I just kind of fell into it. I was started off, I went to Oklahoma State, and I'm one of those, to tell you how much I plan, I was one of those undecided freshmen. And so I'm just kind of going to college because you're supposed to do that after you graduate high school. And I had no idea. I mean, maybe I'll be a veterinarian, go into business, had no idea. And my first year took political science. And I thought, well, hell, that's a degree. I mean, I enjoyed that. So I just said, I'll major in political science because it was fun, because when you're 18, 22 is a lifetime away. Then I, get to, I'm going to graduate, and then it's not exactly like there's a demand for people with a political science degree. Hell, I've majored in it. I don't even know what political science is. It's just kind of talking about stuff, but it's interesting. And so at that point, I'm thinking, do I get an MBA? Do I get a master's in public administration? Or just do I go to law school? Because a lot of people were like this, I'll go be pre-law. And I wasn't like a pre-law guy. I don't know what else to do. So I go to law school, really was not thinking of even practicing law. I kind of wanted to use it as a background and kind of get into business.
Well, hold on a second. You see, you're skipping over a lot of stuff. We got to understand how much trouble you got to while you were in college, because you went to Oklahoma State.
Right.
You had the Red River rivalry. You had stuff going on. Come on, pal. You had to get in trouble at one of the football games. Come on.
Well, I'll say this, that one of the reasons, and
No, wait a minute. Anytime somebody says this, they're dodging the question.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, that I had no intent of ever going into law enforcement. I never thought I would take a polygraph, and I would have had a lot less fun in college had I known I was going to go into law enforcement. And so that's where you kind of just bare your soul and go through, all the stuff you did that college guys do. But, but I tell it to my son, like, look, someday you never know what you're going to do. If you ever have to take a polygraph or do a federal background check to get to be a federal prosecutor or a federal law enforcement job or anything, you'll have a lot less fun. And so,
let's talk about which area of the polygraph did you struggle with then?
So we're jumping ahead.
What's Oklahoma? I mean, was there an animal involved here? Look, come on now.
Yeah, well, so here's the deal.
Hey,
Sorry.
Midwest.
So I took a polygraph that's when I became an agent. So I'd been a lawyer for, I think, it's 8 years. I'd been a prosecutor. So I'm thinking through all of this crap in terms of just like, well, have you ever possessed drugs? Well, I'd not had done that, but there was a time when I knew a friend of mine had had picked up, he was using some anabolic steroids, and I knew he had them in his pocket, and I don't think they were even controlled at the time, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's constructive possession because I knew he was in my car. So I'm writing all that crap down, and friends of mine were like saying, that's not what it means. I'm like, I'm not going to freaking, make that needle jump on a polygraph. So I analyzed every damn question like it was a law school exam. And so I wrote down crap I didn't think was important. And so it was just kind of a weird time to take that.
And notice, Steve, how he dodged. He did
There's
not
nothing
say
self-incriminating here.
That's what your friend did. Let's rewind. Let's go back to college for a minute here. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I've learned that. That I filled that out, and of course at the time I had a bunch of buddies who were working at the bureau. We'll get to in a little bit, and so we're actually at a conference, actually at A1, and I'm filling that thing out, and guys have some kind of house beer in the room at the hotel, and I'm trying to fill that thing out, and they're like, that's not what they mean. Don't put that in there. And that's a weird thing. There's a guy still at the bureau. I'll tell you these polygraphs. We have a question about have you engaged in any crimes that involve moral turpitude. And this guy was actually...
slow down. You got to explain to Murph what, first of all, turpitude is.
well, that's exactly what...
Can you translate this sign language that I'm using rolling right now?
Well, that's exact. This guy, he's an agent now, but he was a counter-drug, National Guard counter-drug intel guy working for the Bureau, and he had that same question. So he asked some buddies, he's like, hey, what's moral turpitude? And the other agent says, that's just like a crime that's like just inherently wrong. But I knew what moral turpitude was, but again, I knew all these things of being a lawyer, so it was just kind of a freaky way for me to do that. And so,
all right, clearly, Your Honor, we have a hostile witness.
Yeah. I'll tell you the polygraph. So he goes through, and so he asked me, he said, okay, are there any crimes that you've committed that have evaded detection? And these polygraphers is being stone cold. That's like, any crime? And he said, yes. I'm like, yeah. And so he said, well, name them. And I'm like, okay. Public drunk in college a lot. And I'm thinking, that's no big deal. And he makes a note. Anything else? Like, yeah. Left of center. what else? And I'm following too close, a failure to signal. He goes,
like a scene out of Liar, Liar with Jim Carrey.
And so I said, and he said, okay, hang on a minute. Are you thinking of all these crimes that you're trying to conceal? I said, no. You asked me anything I've done, but I know I partied in college, and I know I've committed about every traffic violation. I was going through naming everything in our vehicle title. He said, okay, whoa. I just want to know stuff you're trying to hide from me. Like, oh, hell, no, I've told you all that stuff. And so, yeah, but he sat there for all this time. Let me go through. I probably got through 5 or 6 traffic offenses. I'm just listing them out of my head. Yeah, and went through that. And so
would have been easier just to drop the code book on him, say, hey, look, if it's in there, I probably did it.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, name one I haven't done. So anyway, that was that's what it was.
So let's talk about, because you were bleeding orange, orange and black, right? That
is correct? Yes, for
Oklahoma State. And by the way, there's another famous person that went to Oklahoma State, Murph. Bet you can't guess him.
Baker Mayfield.
No, not
that was OU.
Yeah,
Garth Brooks.
There you go.
Yeah,
and a buddy of mine was a DJ, and if he's listening, Storm Dennison. He actually ended up learning or meeting Garth and started. So when Garth did this tour, this friend of mine was rodeoing or announcing rodeos and DJing for this. He actually followed Garth Brooks around for a while on his tour. So really cool stuff. But what led you? I mean, how could you leave the orange and black and go to OU for law school?
Well, because the cost of going to a public law school was 1/4 of a private law school. And so I do bleed orange, but I am a cheap ass, much more so than I am a cowboy. And so I could swallow my orange pride and pay 1/4 the cost to go to
no law school at O State?
Nope. No, yeah. No, there's one at OU, and there's 2 in Oklahoma. There's 3. There's 2 private law schools and OU.
Well, it's the old joke too. What do they call it? It doesn't matter where you go to medical school. What do they even call the guy who graduates at the bottom of his class in medical school?
Yeah,
doctor.
Right.
What do they call you? Yeah, they still call you lawyer. Attorney. So, what made you decide to make that leap though, to go from So, did you graduate as a poli-sci major?
I did.
So, what made you? Where did the bug get into you that says, "Hey, not only do I want to go to law school, but I want to go into prosecution"?
Well, that actually happened. So my first job in law school, between my first and second year, I went to work at in Oklahoma. We have a Supreme Court for criminal cases called the Court of Criminal Appeals, and I went to work there as an intern, and I loved it. I mean, it was just the theory of the law, talking about the procedure, and I thought to myself, I just want to be an appellate lawyer. In fact, I'll be a law clerk. I talked to my judge about it, and I said, I love this. Hey,
hold on there for a second. Everybody's heard the term law clerk, and even I, every now and then I have to look, what does it mean to be because we hear about the people who clerked for Supreme Court justices. What does it mean to be a law clerk?
So
coffee, donuts, sandwiches?
Well, most appellate judges like these if you ever see like a packet for an appeal, all these transcripts and laws and briefs from both sides come in, and they do that. And so what the law clerk does is kind of will go through. They may take a look at the citations of law, read the briefs, check the law, do some research to kind of see where that is. The way we did it there was at the time, the law clerks would write like internal memorandums about the briefs, would read those, and if it was an unpublished case, what we call the summary opinion, which was just just kind of, hey, we don't find any merited relief here. If it's written and unpublished, there'd be more work that went into them, and so. So what the law clerk does is a lot of the grunt
heavy
work
lifting.
Yeah, and assembling the text and putting it together and briefing it. And so we would actually look at the issues, take the briefs in there, read brief the judge on it, and he would kind of decide. That's at least what our judge did. What he's going to do. A lot of issues. Look, if it's a unique issue, then there'd be more time spent on it. But there are some issues that are the law is very settled in there. The judge doesn't need to be briefed on the law, and so the defense may raise them every time, but it's a very well settled law, so they can kind of get through those pretty quickly. So that's kind of what a law clerk does.
What was one of the most unique things you worked on during that time when you were clerking? Was there any particular case or issue that may have made it to the Oklahoma Supreme Court or to a circuit court or beyond?
Let's see. I remember what the interns would do is at the time that's all of the photographs would be analog, and so when the appeals came up, there'd be the packet, and so when you would have these crime scene photos and just kind of these gory crime scene photos, we would kind of just hey, look at this, and we kind of pass those around, and you'd kind of see that. So I do. The one I can remember, I remember there was one that I almost kind of got sick, and I was the one time I just kind of was like a meat cleaver homicide and all the defensive wounds, and they kind of held that out, and I was like, ugh, and that was I don't know why that one kind of sticks in my head, and was kind of just looking at that. You get all the evidence together, read the briefs, and kind of go forward and do that. So I worked mostly, I was an intern. I mean, I worked on what we called summary opinions, which were the things, there was no new area kind of law, not an intricate new issue they're going to publish on, which was really good for me because that made me learn the foundation of what all the law is in criminal procedure and the Fourth Amendment. So because I worked, there was a lot more of them, and I would just kind of read the law and the briefs. And so that was really helpful to me later on, just to kind of learn that appellate process and that basic foundation of what the law is.
Now, are interns paid, or did you just have to suck it up and do it?
They're both. So I started off not paid, and then became a paid intern, which, making like $7 an hour. I think minimum wage by $3.35 back then. So after coming out of college, I thought I was rich. I'm like, my gosh, look at this. I'm making it. Is this what lawyers get paid? Because I was just used to doing things for.
That's what bad lawyers get paid. Good lawyers, no. So, but the process of going through law school, I think Steve, if I remember right, he's probably from a true just out of the chute. He's the first lawyer we've had on. I know we've had other folks that got law degrees, came back and
I think so. I mean, we don't. I mean, there's a distinction between lawyers when you talk about prosecutors and defense attorneys. It's one's good and one's bad.
Unless you've been charged with something, then you want a good defense attorney, right, Murph?
Yeah, I would say my career, although I've been an agency attorney, I would always say I'm a prosecutor, which is a member of the law enforcement community. That's kind of my identity in doing this. I've got a law degree to do that, but.
But during law school, though, did you, kind of like with doctors, at some point you got to pick a specialty and go a certain place. What was it like for you for law school? Was it the same way, or was it just generally you learned about all of these things, and then once you pass the bar, then you go focus on something?
A little bit of both. I mean, sometimes people get jobs in law school and they kind of they decide they kind of like the area, which it was for me. I mean, when I told my Judge Lane, who's since passed away, that I said, look, I think I want to be a law clerk. I love this appellate law, and I love that we're talking about legal issues all the time. I love it. And he said, okay, you need to get in the trenches. You need to go and work somewhere. We're in an ivory tower up here. You need to know what it's like day to day in the trenches. And I said, okay. And so, the summer between my second, and I worked there in the summer, and then it was a full part-time. I'd go up there when I wasn't in class. I was working at the appellate court, in law school too. I stayed on as a paid job. And so I went for summer, and there's a town called Lawton, which is got a base, Air Force, or a Army base down there. And I went down there for the summer just to be an intern. And in Oklahoma, an intern as a prosecutor, you can get what's called a limited license to practice law. And you can make court appearances, sit in there and do trials as an intern. And I went down to Lawton, and there was a lot of crime in Lawton, and got an apartment down there for the summer. And just like we said, that's where the switch flipped. And I just said, oh, holy hell, I will do this for free. And I went back to my judge, who kept my job open for me for my third year of law school.
Okay, you're glossing over a lot of good stuff. Let's rewind. You get in there. What's the first case you get? What's the, obviously everybody's like, I want to do my first case. Do you remember your first case you did?
Yes. So I can remember a lot of the first that were down there. I remember the first time I went into court, and I'm 28 23, 24, I guess, at the time. And I've never been around criminals. And I go in to do a bond
Wait a minute,
appearance.
I thought you said you went to Oklahoma State.
Well, here we go. See,
I'll be posting Morgan's personal cell phone number and his home address here later.
Well, so I go down there, and I do remember this. I'm setting this guy's bond, and he's wanting to get out, and it's like I don't know, some kind of minor burglary case, and I'm just going in there, and it's the first time, and I am within punching distance of him. And at that place, they called them cash, property, or surety, which is give a cash bond, a put up property, or have a bondsman. And that's what they call that down there. And so I just said, and he says, what says the state? And I said, Your Honor, the state requests a $5,000 bond, cash, property, surety. And I'm closing my eyes thinking, this is going to hurt when this sumbitch punches me. And then I realized, he looks at me and just like, but sir, I didn't, I didn't mean to do that, whatever. He gets some kind of BS excuse. And I just said, okay, well, this guy's he looks like he's more scared of me than I am of him. And so that was the first time. I remember that I did I remember my first misdemeanor non-jury trial. We did a robbery, jury trial, an armed robbery jury trial. I had to have a supervising attorney in there, but they let me do quite a bit. I remember the first prelim on a manslaughter case, and so all those things were I loved it. Now part of it was they treated me like I was a prosecutor down there. They asked me to stay on and say, look, we ran through our intern budget. We'll find some money. You can work here your third year. And it was an hour and 15 minutes away from Norman, where I was going to law school. And I felt bad. My judge kept my job open, and he was a phenomenal man. I said, look, Judge, they've asked me to stay. You've kept my job open. You were shorthanded all summer. And he was just like, okay, you're fired. I mean, as he just said, I want you to do that. And I said, thank you so much. He's always was kind of a mentor. And I commuted my last year of law school. I drove an hour and 15 minutes just to go down there.
So how did you balance that with the need to study? Because this is all going to be for naught if you don't pass the bar.
Yeah. So, by my third year of law school, I'm 25. All of my friends have jobs.
Well, you and Murph had something in common. By fourth grade, he was 25.
Yeah. Well, we're there, and I just wanted that. They've got jobs, and you kind of just feel like you're a college student going to class. And then when I'd already got a taste of being in the real world and actually, going into doing cases and screening cases and making court appearances, I just could not wait to get out. And so by that time, I'd taken all the basics that are on the bar, and I was just taking classes to to get my required hours. I mean, it's like crap, like water rights law, ag law, stuff I'd never used just to get the hours. And then you switch the bar exam, then you just focus your full time just on those categories and just study about 14 hours a day, which.
Did you pass it the first time?
It was, the bar exam right before us had a 1/3 failure rate, and it was just, and I'll tell you, so it actually, and the pressure on me after, those people down there in Lawton worked their butt off to get me a prosecutor job. They made phone calls there was not an opening there. There actually was one in my hometown, which is up in north central Oklahoma. And so they hired me. Actually, they said, when they hired me, they said, they're shorthanded, said, okay, when can you start? And I go, well, I got a final on May 7th. They said, it was during the finals week. They said, can you start May the 8th? And I said, yes, I can. And so I took a final. Then I drove. My parents lived there, and I just got my old bedroom and went to work the day after my last final, which was still during finals week. But I call that my anniversary date of May 8th of 96. And but the bar exam, they don't post results until, that's May, until middle of September. So everybody knew, here I come back home, I've got this, and you can get a license to practice pending the bar without even supervising attorney. So I was at my hometown, everybody knew me, the whole courthouse, I'm the new guy. If I'd have failed the bar, I would have done it in front of like everybody. Whoa. Of like, where's he at? Oh, he didn't pass the bar. And so I just kind of said, if I didn't pass it, I'm going to go sell insurance and move to Kansas or something. And
that would have been a step up for you too.
Yeah, well, and there's no reciprocity between Kansas and Oklahoma, so that's why the lawyers never kind of go back and forth. They're one of the few places we don't recognize each other's bar exams.
Hey,
and
Brian,
licensing.
you feel free to call bullshit on Morgan anytime you want to, brother. Not a problem.
Well, no, because I'm correct. Hey, by the way, too, there is a term. Explain that to me real quick, too. And I think I've heard it right, too. Is where you can go to another state and sit in, but it's called pro hoc vice. Is that right?
Yes. So now I have had some Kansas lawyers come back there. I don't know what the Latin term translation is, but to make an appearance pro hoc vice is if you can go to somewhere that you are not licensed. If you're an attorney, like say you're an attorney in Kansas, you're not licensed in Oklahoma, you could appear pro hoc vice, which is specifically to that case. It's out in the open, saying you're not licensed here. Typically in Oklahoma, you have to have a sponsoring attorney that's licensed there as well. So, what times I've seen it, like in a criminal case, they bring somebody down and they'll have a local defense lawyer to make sure you comply with all the rules there as well. But then they may bring them in to do their examinations of like an expert witness or some kind of area of specialty that they may bring them in for that case. So they're practicing, but it's limited just to that case with a local attorney present.
What about the issue of liability, though, right? I mean, so if somebody sponsors you, are they liable for your conduct as well, too?
That's a good question. I don't know how the malpractice. I never have malpractice insurance, so that's a good question. Certainly, there are lawyers responsible for what they do, but if the lawyer does something unethical, not on the record, I don't know that would translate to the sponsoring attorney. But that's a guess. I just haven't. That's a deep question. I haven't. It doesn't happen that often. I mean, probably 2 or 3 times in my career have I seen a pro hoc vice appearance from an out-of-state lawyer.
Well, you said you don't have to have malpractice. Is that because you're a government employee and you're covered by the government?
Correct. Yes. And so, yeah, if you're an agency attorney or prosecutor, there's certain immunities that if if you're within your scope of your employment, advising the agency, if you're within the scope of your employment as a prosecutor, then you don't have to have insurance. Now, if there's certain things that happen, the state has its own insurance that covers you, but that's covered in terms of both indemnifying you and having the coverage by the legal coverage kind of by the Attorney General's office to appear on your behalf.
So, you ever been sued?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have.
I knew that, but it's like everybody sues you, right?
I know. Yeah.
If you're doing your job, you're going to get sued.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wind back to your time. So, what county is Lawton County in?
Comanche County. Lawton is in Comanche County, and so that's in southwest part of Oklahoma. And I grew up, and I was a prosecutor when I started my first job up in north central, up in Ponca City, which is where I'm from.
But as you started out, how much did having the clerking experience and then, doing that summer when you could do limited practice, how did that help you as you started launching your career? Did it tell you, hey, look, are you comfortable doing prosecutions? Did you want to move into doing something else? Where did you go with this?
So I'll take each one of those. The time working in the appellate court really helped in giving me, I had a full year of just reading a ton of legal briefs on both sides, seeing both sides going to argue that.
Was it both criminal and civil?
No, it was just criminal.
Just criminal?
Mm-hmm. And then my time in the DA's office in Lawton it was a tremendous DA's office. I think there were 7 or 8 criminal prosecutors, and I just wanted to be like them. They were just guys that went in there as meat eaters to say, we're not putting up with your bullshit of your crimes, and we're just getting up for the fight. And I just wanted to be like them. I'd watch those older guys as a retired Vietnam helicopter pilot that would go in there, and I just said, I'm going to be like that. I want to be like those guys. And they just had these kind of, imprinted on me doing that. And I think I'll always have that influence on me. And so they did in different ways. And then I kind of just go into being a prosecutor. And ultimately, I've done almost my whole career in drug enforcement. Again, I fell into that too. I go back and I'm just an entry-level prosecutor. And then I've been there less than a year. up in Ponca City and
what
K
county is that?
That's K County. We have
County?
two counties, K and Noble County, in our district, and we had a grant funded position then it was called the Burn Grant, now it's called JAG, but a grant funded position as a drug prosecutor, and that position came open. And so I've supervised the drug task force. I do all the drug prosecutions. There's Highway Patrol had an interdiction team that worked that county in I-35, which was a phenomenal interdiction team, taught me a lot. And so I'm 25, 26 years old, and I've got guys that have been in narcotics enforcement longer than I've been alive, and I'm supposed to supervise them. I'm way underqualified, but then I just kind of got into then I got into drug enforcement, and then again I just have just focused on that from that point up until today.
But had it not been for that, did you have a preference? I mean, as you were doing all these different things like robbery, crimes against persons, crimes against property, were you getting pulled in a direction that you would have liked to have gone, and then the drug stuff showed up, or what happened?
Not at that time. I mean, I'd done those crimes. I just wanted to be a prosecutor.
Wait a minute. You'd done those crimes? Are we having to get admission here?
I've done those prosecutions, yeah.
Self-incrimination.
Let's go back and talk about your polygraph.
Right, yeah, that's I did. I'd done all those. Those kind of prosecutions. I'm sorry.
Just before you go any further, you have the right to remain silent.
Yeah, I know.
Anything you say.
Yeah. Anytime my friends say, "Hey, what would you advise me as a lawyer?" I'm like, just don't talk. How about that?
There you go.
Or as the Brits say, you don't have to say anything, but if you do say anything, it can be used in evidence against you. We're going to be interviewing a British cop tomorrow, and I like their cautions, what they call it. Like our warnings and stuff.
Right.
But I like the fact, though, they go, you do not have to say anything, but if you fail to mention anything that you later it may harm your defense if you fail to mention something now that you later rely on. The fact that you got to come in for an interview. I mean, you can say no comment, but a little bit different than us. But going back to that, so you were talking about it just kind of went that way. What was the appeal, though, about drugs that made you want to stay with it and not move on to something else?
Okay, so two things. When I was very young, I will tell you, I want no part of sex crimes prosecutions. I think they're vitally important. Hats off to those that do it. But I remember I was second chairing a sex crimes prosecutor who's tremendous, the first assistant there. And it was early on, and the guy was a police officer. And when the jury acquitted the guy, it's a swearing match, I didn't do it. And he comes in as a detective, and I never did this stuff. When we came back, and I see that kid's eyes fill up with tears, and back in the victim witness room, and he said, "Are they saying it didn't happen?" And we're just, what do you say to that? And he was, I don't know, about 10 years old, and he said, "I don't care. I don't ever want to see him again." And his eyes he's just devastated. And I hated that. I wanted no part of that. So the attraction to me, and look, I've done some death penalty cases, which when you prosecute those cases, you have your cops, but your fact witnesses are almost always, they have difficulty and baggage. So they drink a lot, and that's one of mine was a bunch of winos. One guy had killed a couple, but with cops, they're professional witnesses. And so they appear with drug cases, especially when I had the same guys appearing over and over again, and they're subject matter experts. It just is something that I liked for myself, working with those. And what I have found throughout my entire career in drug cases is look, what separates drug crimes, really vice crimes, if you include, prostitution and gambling, but drug crimes are unreported. If some guy sells an ounce of meth and a guy gets his ounce of meth, that's a felony on both sides that, it may carry life in prison depending on the record. But when that happens, it is unreported. Whereas burglaries, sex offenses, cops react to those when they take reports and investigate those. So you have to be more proactive in infiltrating, use all the right side of your brain in drug enforcement. And so in learning my background kind of with the law and working with cops, things with the interdictors, the drug task force guys, and you get all the way up to HIDA groups and DEA and when you pull off somebody on a traffic stop and you go do a controlled delivery or run that, then you're using the right side of your brain, which to me, I just enjoy. I think and I just love that part of it, and kind of my background to help guys do that. Because another thing is, every drug case, there's a search or a seizure, even a wiretap. You're seizing a conversation under the Fourth Amendment. A lot of victim crimes, it's all testimony. There might be a Fourth Amendment issue, but it's all of the Fourth Amendment for us, and being proactive to go out there and do that. Whether it's a street crimes unit, interdiction, about any look. Drug enforcement is special operation. It just is, and so. Because that's more challenging, I've just really, really kind of enjoyed that, and what I've had in my background to kind of work with officers and do that.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I'm going to dispute you to say drug crimes don't get reported. Murph and I have done a couple stories on rocket scientists who call up and say, somebody just ripped me off of my meth.
Yeah.
It's usually meth, right?
Yeah.
But in your experience, though, kind of ties forward. In your experience, out of all the crimes that are committed, homicide, rape, you take your part 1 crimes on NCIC, rape, robbery, murder, auto theft, arson, burglary, aggravated assault, can't think of the other one. How many of those things have a drug thread running through them? How many of those have a relations to drugs?
So I would say the overwhelming majority, but I can say this. There was I don't know if Murph knows Jeff Stamm, who Jeff and of course you probably know Jeff. I know him from the kind of the speaking tour. Jeff was a guy. He wrote his book on dope about DEA and the formation of DEA and drug policy. It had a huge influence on me. I saw Jeff. I think we were in DC both at a conference, and he's mentored me. But Jeff, when he was the Midwest HIDTA director, commissioned a study. All the law enforcement.
You said it twice. We have a rule. You got to define acronyms. So we know what it means. So tell people what HIDTA is.
So HIDTA is a federal program. The acronym is High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, and it's a federal program where some money goes through, and the HIDTA is kind of a quasi governmental entity that actually oversees the board is made up typically of law enforcement within the trafficking the area. They appoint a director. It's oftentimes a retired law enforcement officer, and that director kind of oversees assets that go to different way. Now they also be involved in what's called deconfliction, which is a reporting system to make sure that that two people aren't chasing the same target, or if you're on an operation, to make sure it's not a blue on blue.
Does that sound familiar, Murph? Maybe at a Waffle House or an IHOP in Florida?
Oh yeah. It's I worked in the Atlanta HIDTA for quite a while, and it's a great facility for bringing together the feds with the state and local, so everybody works together towards a common goal.
Yeah, and well, Stamm, his HIDTA group in Midwest HIDTA, and I don't know we're not in Midwest HIDTA, but I think Kansas, Missouri, kind of I'm not sure what all states are in there, but he commissioned a study with surveying all of the law enforcement in his group, and it's a tremendous report that's out there. And they determined that they know that 2/3 of the property and violent crime in the Midwest HIDTA coverage area, 2/3 had a direct connection to drug trafficking or drug distribution. So again, the numbers when look, a lot of the people pushing.
So wait a minute. So you're telling me selling drugs and using drugs is not a victimless crime?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest things with all of the policy reforms is this these kind of perpetuation of myths. That people wouldn't it be nice if people use drugs in a vacuum? I mean, take any state right now with a homeless population that's a broke ass homeless population, and they use drugs. Well, just to make it clear, dope dealers don't give away their shit for free. So how do you think they fund their drug use? And so, we interviewed, this kind of stuff interests me. So recently, I don't know, a couple of years ago, we interviewed a guy, some officers were flipping him as an informant, and he was could buy from heroin sources. And I said, how often do you use? And I think he said he uses heroin daily, about $100 a day. And I said, well, did you ever have a job the last 3 years? And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, how'd you fund it? Well, and he basically was just stealing. He would go to about any store that he could steal stuff and return it, either sell it to someone, trade it for dope, or just kind of do the old burn and return and just kind of take it back and do that. And over the course of now, he said he stole 3 times a week. Now, he used daily. His math didn't add up. Let's do his dumbass math. What I figured out was that he, for 3 years, he had 150 theft events. He was detected one time by store personnel, but he wasn't arrested. They saw him, he ran out and didn't get caught. And so all of those, whether they report as loss inventory or whatever it is, it's categorized as
shrinkage.
As some other kind of non-drug crime. But it as its essence, it is, look, people don't go and steal copper to pay their effing JUCO tuition. I mean, it's not like somebody goes on a meth pipe and says, hey honey, I can't go to my CrossFit gym anymore. I'm smoking meth again. I mean, that all these auto burglaries and everything, it is to fund drug addiction. So when you talk about relapsers or recidivism, whatever it might be, that's really a euphemism for victimizing somebody. One of the things, it didn't get a lot of publicity, but under the Obama administration, the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, did a study. They studied 400,000 prisoners that were released in 30 states. Oklahoma's was one of them, but 400,000, that's a pretty big-ass sample survey. And what they found was within 46% of those released from prison were arrested within 1 year. 2/3 were arrested within 3 years. I think at 6 years, it's 79%. By the 9-year period, 83% were arrested. Now, what they'll say is, well, those are just fail to pay process parole crimes. Nope, that was like less than 1%. And it's like, well, there's drug offenders in the war on drugs. Well, it turns out 77% of the drug offenders, 77% of released drug offenders were arrested for a non-drug crime. So when you kind of go back to when you talk to police officers and say, look, we know directly that by the surveys that 2/3 the violent crime and property crime is actually fueled by the drug trade. I don't know what the other 1/3 is. And with all this reform measures, I mean, it's a pretty simple formula. If you tolerate drug use, drug-related crimes go up.
It's kind of the reverse. It's kind of corollary to the broken window theory. It's kind of moved on from there. But if you allow one broken window to be there for you folks, go back and read this. You allow one broken window to be there, then pretty soon there's 2. And if there's 2, there's 4. Then there's abandoned cars, and then all sorts of other crimes follow it. Because it's a perception by people. You don't care about your neighborhood. You don't care about this. And therefore, these types of things are allowed to move into your neighborhood.
Well, in New York, when, Bratton and Giuliani took the broken windows essay from Wilson, and they did that.
He was out of Rutgers. I had a chance to meet him.
Wilson?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a brilliant social scientist that has a lot of impact. Well, their misdemeanor arrests went up. Violent crime went down.
And you know something? And this is a real quick sideline. When I was a detective, and even as a street officer starting Garden City, I made lots of curfew arrests. In fact, I made so many curfew arrests, they called me Captain Curfew. But you know what? When I was a detective and I started look at the stats, I started telling these guys, you got to make these curfew arrests. Why? Because when you arrest kids that have no business being out, if they're young enough past 10:30 or if they're under 18 past midnight, guess what happened to our property crimes against people in all those areas? They went down too. There is a direct cause and effect.
In New York's, it was kind of the murder capital. Their murder rate went down, I think, like 65%.
And that was all the guys doing jumping turnstiles, window washing, panhandling,
all those things,
all the little quality of life stuff.
And what's interesting, it is actually New York's prison population. When it went up everywhere else, New York's prison population went down. Now, the ones that were getting sentences went longer, but by not tolerating deviance and starting at that basic level, then violent crime just went down, and it outpaced the rest of the country. I mean, there was an effort right there because of all the crime. There was an effort to actually in the 90s to direct enforcement towards people in the streets, right? And they got tough on crime for a while, and violent crime went down. A decades-long decline up until about 2008, 2010, kind of these idea of policy changes happened. We tolerate that. We're going to reduce the prison population. And all of a sudden, we see this trajectory of violent crime going up.
Well, the way they reduce the prison population is create so much crime, there's no way the prison can support them. So then you pass bills like California did to release a lot of people out of prison, which doesn't solve your problem in the first place. So here we go again.
Yeah, and thanks for quantifying and qualifying that, because to most people, law-abiding citizens, that's common sense. But when you got the numbers to back it up, it's just like employing science to justify what you're talking about. So thanks for bringing that up.
And that's we'll get to the book, but it is just the history is so consistently. Well, look, they've tried this before. They let people out of prison in the 60s. They reduced the prison population from 212,000 to I think 190,000. And that was an effort. This idea is getting recycled now. And then what happens is drug use skyrockets, violent crime explodes up.
And now, even today, we're starting to see organizations that want to come in and let's review everybody in jail and let's see what their sentence was. Is it commensurate with the crime? Well, it was at the time it was committed. You can't go back and change the laws later.
Well, and one of the things, well, again, that'd be nice. No one ever says that about tax evasion. Is just say, hey, you know what? Here's the deal. We've changed the tax code. Therefore, we're going to legalize your tax evasion when everyone else paid their taxes. But it's just kind of this reformer thing that's kind of been out there. And look, there's been a lot of there's a pretty clear historical record of the success of enforcement, the devastation of laying off of enforcement. But I'm kind of fear this little era we're in right now. We've had one of the most accelerated explosions in crime that is parallels exactly efforts to reduce enforcement. And
absolutely. Look at what's going on in Atlanta, Georgia right now. Morgan and I were talking about this yesterday. We're probably going to do a Patreon special on it, where the Antifa groups are moving into those areas that they want to say, oh, this is our private area. Screw you, pal. You don't own the property. And I don't want to go off on tangent there, but I agree with you 100%. We're becoming too permissive when it comes to the rule of law.
Well, look, three things define a nation: language, borders, culture, right? And if our culture is to allow people to break the law and get away with it, see, people think cops want to be heavy-handed. No, we just want people to. So the one disagreement I'll have, we do as best as we can. We're imperfect. We do as best as we can to stay apolitical. But I really want the president to stop saying we got to retrain police officers to shoot them in the leg. If you've been to the range with some of the cops I have, they're lucky they can hit the target, much less, I'm going to shoot you in the knee from 50 yards on a dead run. We're all expert shots.
I saw some other comment on that this morning. I mean, earlier before, he'd said shoot him in the leg, and then to retrain people not to use that. And again, they talk about law enforcement training. But
how about citizen training?
Yeah, well,
how about we retrain people to follow the law?
But here's the deal. Maybe I think of this because I'm a lawyer. The training we give law enforcement comes from the law and the Fourth Amendment, and is it reasonable to take someone's life? If you shoot at somebody, it's deadly force. It doesn't matter if you shoot them in the knee, which we're never trained to do that because it's deadly force. We can only use deadly force when there's probable cause to believe that the person is a threat to the officer or other individuals. Our training that we have in law enforcement comes from the constitutional basis upon which the government actor can take someone's life. And so the training is just part of what we can. So you're going to have to actually change and say, all of a sudden, shooting somebody in the knee is not deadly force. That's not accurate. You could hit it. I mean, you hit somebody in the leg, hit a femoral artery. Exactly.
Yeah, they're dead. They're dead in a minute.
It is, and how that idiocy goes unchallenged blows my mind. But then again, I mean, that's the, I mean, I could, and whether it's, and again, it may be political, may also kind of be cultural, but when there are just these groups that perpetuate these ideas, it just becomes crazy. And sometimes they say things out loud, which when everyone, during 2020, like and I know we'll get to it, but the funny thing is, when I'm writing this book about criminal justice reform, the premise, and I began it in November of 19, the premise of the book is if you lay off of enforcement, whether it's through laws, whether it's from a DA not enforcing the law, whatever it may be, if you restrict enforcement, bad shit will happen. And then we have the summer of 2020 with an effort to defund and cop-free zones in Seattle. The only thing that surprised me is how quick the decline was, because it blew up. But I'm trying to get the manuscript done, get it to the copy editor, and there's all these things I can't keep up. So that's why the thing there's a lot of things that can exemplify, but the Jacob Blake shooting, Jacob Blake, the first narrative comes out that
give everybody some context.
So Jacob Blake was in Kenosha. And it went through phases, but he was shot by the police, was not fatal and survived. And so then the first story that comes out is he's a black male shot by a white police officer. That's what all the headlines were saying. He was an unarmed black male shot in the back by the police. And that was out there. Well, there's some riots that come up there. Well, I think Joe Biden was running for president and said, at a minimum, the officers need to be charged. Kamala Harris said she was proud of Jacob Blake, and this narrative just kind of went out there. And then it starts up, and the NBA cancels games. I mean, they canceled all of their games to protest the Jacob Blake. LeBron James makes this quote saying, WTF, this is why hunting our people, we demand justice. There are riots in the streets because these officers are not charged. Immediately after the NBA cancels their games, and they go through they make all their little statements to slam the police, and LeBron James says that. Then the Wisconsin State Police, whatever they call them, the ones investigating the shootings,
Bureau of Criminal Investigation, I think it's called.
Yeah, they have an outside agency doing it. They release, and there's this chatter like, are the officers yelling something about a knife in the cell phone video, and no one's commenting on that? Well, then the Wisconsin Department of whatever it is, that agency, the state police that's investigating the shooting, just say there were Jacob Blake had admitted he was armed with a knife. The officers asked him to do it. There's a knife found where he was, and then I think it was the New York Post, because no one else wants to come out with this, comes out with a story that essentially, the narrative was he got mistaken because he basically was trying to break up a fight between two females. They thought he was an aggressive male, and he got shot in front of his kids, the horror, and just all this kind of inflammatory stuff. There's riots because these officers are not in jail. Then we get the other facts that actually he had a warrant out for his arrest for sexual assault. He is actually at his victim's house. If you read, it's horrendous. The things in the affidavit he had done to sexually assault her, thinking she had cheated on him, had been in an on and off relationship. He's there. They tase him. I think he puts one of them in a headlock. He's got a knife. He won't drop it. They're going back there, and then at that point, when he won't drop the knife, that's when he gets shot. And all of a sudden, and I think I haven't checked in a while, but there's still some of these traditional media sites saying he's an unarmed black man shot in the back, and that's false. And then I just blows my mind how no one can just say, "Hey, President Biden, you said that these officers should have been charged." And of course, and since that time, now the manuscript is turned in. It kind of goes dark. No one talks about it. They've since been cleared by the local DA as justified shooting. Biden's DOJ investigates their civil rights violation, finds on civil rights violation. Now, I just don't know why
that doesn't get publicized.
No, why doesn't someone ask him, "Hey, you? I thought we were intolerant for comments that could cause unrest, and especially when they're false. And so, you had made a comment that they weren't charged, and your own Justice Department said they shouldn't be charged. was it there were riots because they weren't? How do you feel about that? Is that should we take down those comments? But I think we've kind of seen that whether something is inflammatory or inaccurate kind of depends on the perspective of the people overseeing it. So in our world, that makes being a public safety officer so much more difficult. It's one thing when the jackasses that from these interest groups just go through and kind of will say, I mean, they're going to say what they're going to say. They annoy us. But when public officials say those kind of things, it makes it so much more difficult for all of these officers doing that. And it's led to a massive morale problem and exodus that I kind of fear long term for that.
Yeah, I got a couple comments on all this too, because back when Biden was vice president, he was one of the keynotes at the International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference. I think it was in Orlando, and he could have been more pro law enforcement, rule of law. We've got to stand up for what's right. This is what our country's based on. All the rhetoric. But then, as popular opinion, trending opinion changes, it just makes you sick how politicians will change their opinion so they can get that vote. And so we had John Mattingly on here earlier this year on Game of Crimes, and he was involved in the Breonna Taylor shooting in Louisville, Kentucky. And what did we hear from John, Morgan? We heard that one of the people coming out calling the police criminals was our Vice President, Kamala Harris. And then a lot of the high-profile sports stars, musicians, the popular people come out without knowing what the facts are and make their statements. And so now when we've got our president and our vice president making statements like this, how do we have any trust in them? I want to ask President Biden, how many times have you been shot at? Because I want to see you under fire shoot somebody in the leg. Unfortunately, I've been in a lot of shootings in 38 years as a cop. I was involved in a lot of shootings, especially down in Columbia. You're putting lead down range to get your ass to a safe place is what you're trying to do.
Look, man, you can't get small enough and hide behind something when that stuff happens. But see, the problem is the media and the narrative, because once it gets out there, it's out there, right? It's very hard to unring that bell. So it was the same fiction in Ferguson, Missouri, hands up, don't shoot. The same DOJ department, Obama's DOJ, Eric Holder and the folks went down there. They investigated officer, I think it was Derek Wilson. Again, what did we find? No charges. What did we find in the case of John Mattingly? No charges. Look, if they're looking for a sacrificial lamb, it would have been, look, you guys all know, and especially you, Brian Surber, our guest of honor, you know that you can indict a ham sandwich at a grand jury. And the fact that you can't even get to that level, the fact that the attorney general in Kentucky refused to even take the case to the grand jury because it didn't meet the threshold, we've got to be careful about the stuff we put out there because we live with it. And to your point, we live with the consequences. We live with the riots. We live with the aftermath.
Well, and two things that, one is like, well, somebody may say, well, okay, so what if Biden says some kind of goofy thing about shoot him in the leg? Well, there are riots going on right now in Atlanta.
Because of what people say.
Right. Because you should have shot him in the leg. I know he shot at you. You should have shot him in the leg. You just go right to kill. You want to shoot. I mean, it's the use of deadly force. That is the legal standard right there. And
well, Brian, but when somebody does that, look, somebody says you should have shot him in the leg. Then to your point, like we said, you hit him in the femoral artery and then you kill him. Well, you should have shot him then. You should have missed the femoral artery. There's always that slippery slope of that argument. The whole point is when you're taught about the use of force, and I want to ask you a clarifying question about that too, because you used a different term than I would have used. But when you use deadly force or when you use lethal force, you're shooting at the largest available target. If that's center mass, that's center mass. If that's a head or if it's a... But the point about it is you're not shooting to kill. Murph and I, we have talked about this many times. You're shooting to stop the threat. You use only that amount of force necessary to stop the threat. If it takes 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots. But I wanted to ask you something. First of all, I want to clarify something. It's the Division of Criminal Investigation in Wisconsin rather than BCI. So I wanted to be factually correct. But you said you used the term when it comes to use of deadly force. You said probable cause. Has things changed versus a reasonable belief? What would a reasonable person believe?
Well, it's probable cause is through the filter of, it's always been a probable cause from Tennessee v. Gardner and the cases in use of force, but the probable cause is evaluated in the context of a reasonable person. So, it's kind of tomato. It might be, in my world, I would say probable cause, because that is if you're talking about a 1983 action, when we had to review in my prosecutor days, a lot of the officer involved shootings, whether or not it was fatal or not, the standard is the same. If you shoot at somebody, it is the use of deadly force. That doesn't mean you intend to. It's not like in the military, like we're green lighted to take out the terrorist, we're going to kill him. It's not that. It is the use of deadly force. And so that may kill him, it may not. But as soon as it stops, but as soon as the threat goes away, there's no longer his ability to use deadly force.
You could shoot and miss, and the guy stops or girl stops, raises her hand and says, okay, I give up. And then it's over. It's still the use of lethal force. Nobody was hit, but you could even miss the target, and the situation has resolved itself.
If we had shootings, even if it didn't make contact, even if it wasn't fatal, we still reviewed those in the exact same manner in the DA's office, the district attorney's office, to determine if it was a lawful use of force. Which is maybe I kind of gravitate towards that. We have to look at these things, and again, it is not, and with that probable cause, it's not as the reality. Again, this is what happens, and even I think courts do this sometime. If you see me if we're in an encounter, you've got intel, I'm a violent person that said I'm not going to be taken by the police, and you go to arrest me, and I reach in my waistband like I'm pulling something out, and then you shoot a guy. Use deadly force, whether it's shoot at him, miss, whatever, however that ends up. Well, if he's got, say he's got some, I've seen this before. He has a bunch of Oxycontin tablets stuffed in his underwear. Well, you don't have to wait to see, because you can say he's unarmed, but the issue is was it reasonable? Was it probable cause, and was it reasonable to believe that that individual posed a threat to you? And you don't
based on the knowledge you had based at the time, based on the information, based upon the environment too. He's not like 100 yards away to where he's not going to be able to hit you with something. But yeah, and that's the whole point. I think it's context. Murph, you had something.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing about John Manley's case with Breonna Taylor and the Kentucky Attorney General. The Attorney General was the one state official that backed the police. I think we said, that you said he refused to take the case. He's the one person that actually backed.
What I meant was he because it didn't meet the threshold, he refused to take it to the court for even indictment.
Yeah. So he was, and the funny thing, he was a black man.
Yeah.
And it's, not to get racial, but, the facts are the facts. The other thing I want to mention too is when you were describing I started to say demise of law enforcement, but what's going on with law enforcement today and defunding the police? You sounded like a Southern Baptist minister, man, like an evangelist.
You
I
were
loved it. Yeah, I was ready to pound the table and say, "Amen, brother, bring it on."
That's kind of where, if with all I've done in my career, and sometimes you think, when I decided when I left being an agent went back to be a prosecutor for a few years at a first assistant, I talked to my old boss, who's now the presiding appellate judge, and he kind of said, I think you'll find that all the stuff he's done has prepared this for this next step in your career. I kind of feel like that with what I've done is saying, look, there are a lot of guys and kind of go out there and work dope and do that. But for me, in terms of just, I've kind of danced in both worlds. I've been a narcotics agent for our agency for several years. I've been a lawyer, kind of, they're entirely different worlds. I don't know that each one fully respects the challenges the other faces. I kind of joke I'm bilingual and can deal in both those worlds, but it is something that I very much at this point in my life I've very much believe in public safety. It's essential function. And I think the devastating things that drugs and the tolerance of drugs is causing, even with the child abuse and things like that. And so we have to have the next generation of officers, and we need to counter the narratives because cops are just kind of mission driven, which is good. I mean, that's who you want. They go out there, here are the rules, we're going to go play the game. We're not in the propaganda. We don't do that. And I think we have we're behind in messaging the importance. I mean, it should be a home game for us. We have the knowledge, the facts are on our side. That's what we do. But
hey, you just brought up something, and I saw it on a Twitter thread, and I thought it was a great way to respond because somebody's trying to put out some misinformation, Steve, on what was going on in Atlanta. Somebody put out a picture and said, "Hey, look, these cops," and they were all SWAT team guys. You could tell they're all jocked up and everything. Oh, where's the footage? Because all of these guys that were involved in the raid are wearing body cameras. You could see the Axon body cameras on there. Georgia Bureau of Investigation, who's handling the investigation, didn't sit back and let it perpetuate. They actually went into the Twitter thread, said, this picture is false. These folks are not involved. They were nowhere near the scene. But the problem is if it's with social media and with the velocity of media that's coming out, you put out a misinformation like that, it then becomes fact. And now you're trying to, in people's mind, change facts as opposed to disillusion them of this misinformation they were in possession of.
Just don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. That's what this all comes down to.
Well, and I'll tell you what I found is like, look, if you are in law enforcement, then, I mean, we deal in facts. I mean, if you embellish facts on a search warrant, you can get hammered with a Frank's challenge, which is a challenge. Say you had reckless disregard for the truth. You can lose the case if you are ever found to have been dishonest. We call it giglio, and that's basically a court case about being able to impeach the officer.
So was there a movie made about that called American Giglio?
I don't know.
Law enforcement joke.
Yeah.
I'll be here all week. Thank you very much.
I apologize.
By the way, we used the term. Tell everybody what giglio, because that's something that's not relatively new, but it's new compared to when guys like Murph and I started.
Yeah. So giglio, it's basically the term is used in our profession to say, are you giglio impaired? Are you giglio dirty? Meaning, is there any information in your background showing you have any instances of being dishonest? And now giglio itself is just about, you should be able to impeach constitutionally. A defendant should be able to impeach a witness against him. In fact, giglio itself, I think, was dealt with whether an informant got payments. And so, again, if you have been under the evidence code federally, and it's been adopted in most states, if you have a instance of dishonesty in your professional capacity, that could be used to impeach your credibility. Like if you were found to have lied in a report, like, well, you could say, if you're on the stand, the defense could say, well, Agent Murphy, you're saying right now that my client did this, yes. Would you ever lie about that? No. Have you been found to lie in a report to cover up a mistake, to make it whatever it might be? And that could be a proper impeachment question. So, like in my current agency, it's because we have DOJ's giglio policy is a little bit more strict than actually the law is. So if you're giglio impaired, it's an essential job function for us. I mean, it's a for-cause termination.
Just asked Mark Furman in the OJ trial when F. Lee Bailey caught him in a huge lie. Now, if he admitted it, it probably would have been bad, but the fact he outright lied about it, and then they brought in audio tapes of him using racial epithets to describe people, that's one of the biggest things that probably, everything he did was probably credible, but the fact that he was not credible about whether or not he had said the N-word is what impacted, I think, that case to a huge degree.
Well, you know what? I mean, if our public servants, we've given them special powers, special authorities, they should be held to a higher degree. And I don't know if you've heard this, Brian, but we say this continuously here on Game of Crimes, is nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. You've got to maintain your integrity. If the public can't trust you, you need to get out of the profession.
Well, so we should probably make clear, none of us have, everyone I know in law enforcement, we know that's the rule. I mean, that's fine. We absolutely accept the fact, people's liberty is at stake, and us doing it the right way and us being honest in doing it, again, that's what separates us from them, and that's fine. It makes it more difficult, but that's the only way to do it. And so, there's no concern with that. And look, that's exactly right. I mean, that because of my position, I've been involved in several cases involving, I say, a corrupt officer. An officer committing crimes, I'd say, would corrupt. Now, the vast majority because I worked in the Narcotics Bureau, it'd be an officer that may have got addicted to pills, does prescription fraud, but that's fine. That's going to be career ending when those things happen. There are times it involves kind of corruption, but I'll tell you, you want to see cops get energized and put their energy. It is on someone that actually engages in that, and they'll expose it. But we do that, and again, the general public doesn't see that, but the intolerance and how drop everything, we're going to get on this, when there is a potential of a corrupt police officer, it can have no place. We do. And so, they don't see that. And that's and again, it's
very few professions have a vigorous process like law enforcement does. In other words, if you're a doctor and you screw up on a surgery, you're still operating the next day. Somebody might sue you years down the road, right? Or the hospital has to take action. All you got to do is watch a couple of the documentaries to see what folks have gotten away with. Dentists, teachers, even some of the professional politicians. My God, can you imagine if the same rigorous process was applied to politicians as it is law enforcement? Half the Congress would be out on suspension right now pending investigation.
Well, look, this guy in New York that just got elected up there, he lied about everything, and they put him on committees.
Oh, that George Santos. Yeah, I mean, what a moron. Folks, as you can see, too, we don't care politically. If you're a moron, you're a moron. Nobody has an exclusive lock on being a moron.
No. It crosses party lines for sure.
Well, what is it? Einstein said one time, he said, there's only two things that are infinite, the universe and stupidity, and I'm not so sure about the universe. So,
right.
Hey, well, this is a great thing. Let's talk about this in the light of, because I think early on you said you did this for 8 years, right? When you first got out of law school?
Yeah, my first stint I did 8 years as a prosecutor and drug prosecutor for 7 of that.
So, but that was that was your first job, right? That
Correct.
was coming out of law school?
Yes.
Okay. Because we're going to talk about a couple cases here, these cases that we want to talk about, the serial rapist and the young girl, the Amber Alert. Where did that occur in your career? During this time or at a later time? Because we want to kind of keep things chronologically in order.
Sure. The serial rapist happened actually when I was in the DA's office that first 8 years.
Let's talk about that then, because that is an interesting case for one thing. The other thing, too, folks, we'll pimp out his book, which you were kind enough to send to me. Thank you very much. It's called Injustice for All, The Familiar Fallacies of Criminal Justice Reform by Brian Surber. I'm assuming that we can find this, Amazon, places like that, right?
Amazon, Kindle, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, all those places.
So I've got it here. Thank you for the inscription, too. I don't do anything anymore. I just run my mouth. It's guys like you and other folks who are still out there doing the mission of public safety. But just even look, when you listen to some of the chapters, the reason I'm saying that, when you look at just some of the chapters and what you talk about, we've got things like the purpose of the state, the evolution of small government and libertarian thought, the wicked among us, enforcement in the small government, libertarian, the experience of legalizing marijuana. I think you guys need to read that. Lesson in history, where did the meth lab go? The lack of alternatives, and conclusion, the decline is accelerating. I mean, these are all things that kind of, if almost anybody involved in your job could almost write a similar book. In other words, you see these things over and over again. So let's talk about during this 8 years. You said you were drug crimes all but for 1 year, that it was 7 years you were doing drug offenses.
Uh-huh.
Then how did you get a serial rapist case?
Well, so there was my boss at the time, the DA, Mark Gibson, we were really tight. He got me into John Douglas's books, and Douglas, he wasn't even as popular as he is now, but he had written, his first one was Mind Hunter. I'd written, which is kind of outlines how profiling, and it kind of tell people, it's been in most of our careers, but the criminal profiling as a discipline is very new. Douglas kind of came into that, was just studying to get an FBI agent, studying some serial offenders, and found all of these consistent traits that was able to put together a package as to how serial offenders, especially sex offenders, what they had done. And I was fascinated by his books.
Have you read William Ressler too?
I have not.
You need to read. So William Ressler is kind of the more analytical, scientific counterpart to John Douglas. So he was one of the original members. In fact, a lot of the stuff he founded around sexual deviancy and things like that are part of the penultimate piece of doing serial crime profiling, along with Douglas too. So you got to read William Ressler too.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely do that. And so and I'll tell you, Mindhunters is fascinating. Douglas has a book called Anatomy of a Motive, which is an entire book that basically says that no one does something for no reason. You don't just find yourself walking, one state away at 3 a.m. What are you doing? Nothing. I mean, and so I honestly think that if you're going to be an investigator or a prosecutor, if you think of that, it's a way to kind of examine that. So I'd read those books, but just loved them. And so we had the way we did misdemeanors up there was we just did them once. They just kind of got in the way. We had 5 prosecutors, the whole courthouse, the judges, the defense lawyers on the contract. One Friday a month, we just spent all time on misdemeanors, and we didn't mess with them any other time. We'd focus on everything else. And so what we'd done is whoever had filed a case, anyone could make a recommendation, deal with the defendant, the defense lawyer, just try to clean out as much as we could on that one Friday a month.
So out of all those misdemeanors, how many of them went to trial? I mean, percentage-wise, less than 1%?
Oh, gosh. There's probably 2 or 3 times the misdemeanors compared to felonies, and they probably go to trial probably 1/10 the rate. I mean, for every, I would say that the trial rate is probably 10% compared to felonies across the board, and probably even more. I mean, it's just rare that a misdemeanor goes to trial. And so anyway, this guy comes. So I did not file this case, and so a lot of guys represent themselves, and we just make some kind of recommendation, get it closed out, and do this. Well, I come in and I'd never read anything about this case. Someone else had screened it and filed it, and I look at the report, and essentially this guy was walking around Ponca City, which is our biggest town, at 3 a.m. in the summer in a neighborhood. He had white cotton gloves on. The cops go and ped check him, like, what are you doing? And he's got duct tape. He's got no explanation as to why he's there. He's got athletic tape in his pocket, bandana. He's got a knife. I think he even had a gun on him, some binoculars, and these gloves. And they're like, okay, normally they would send that charge to the city. He had a little bit of weed on him and this carrying a weapon, which at the time was illegal without having a concealed carry. So, but they just thought he was weird. They're going to put him at a court of record. They sent him up to the district court. And if you look at profiling, well, there's one thing with sexual offenders, serial rapists. They will have a rape kit, and that kit is specific to them. What they use every time to do the rape, and so this clearly was a rape kit. And again, you kind of go back to Douglas, the anatomy of a motive. I mean, he's like, what are you doing? Nothing. Well, bullshit. You're there doing something. And they couldn't find his car, and so they just kind of took him to jail. And so I'm talking to the guy, and I said, man, where are you from? And at the time, he said he worked on like one of Ted Turner's buffalo ranches up somewhere in Kansas, actually. So, Morgan, one of those Kansas perverts coming down to Oklahoma.
Figures.
And he's not a Kansas pervert. He's an Oklahoma pervert that got lost and was probably trying to have relations with the buffalo in Kansas. That's what happened. And we kicked his ass back to Oklahoma.
He was from Kansas. And so, but he had no connection to Ponca City at all. And I'm like, what are you doing down here? Well, I was just stretching my legs. Like, from what? Well, I went fishing out at a lake out there, and I got out and stretching my legs on my way back to Kansas, like 3.5 hours away. And where he was nowhere on the route.
Well, that's 3.5 hours driving, right, not walking.
Yeah. And he said his car was parked somewhere, and he was out just on a walk, and it's just BS. Well, another thing about serial offenders is 100%. They always begin their crimes, whether it's arson, a serial murderer, a serial sexual offender, they always begin in their comfort zone, which it could be where they grew up. It could be where they currently live. And it's just a natural tendency. If you're going to go start committing crimes, you're going to go to where you're familiar. And only when they get that kind of skill, they get away with it, they learn from it, then do they go mobile and go interstate. And that's one of the reasons it's hard to catch serial offenders is once they are identified as a serial offender, they're out of their own geographical area. And so I just knew there's no way this dude's got a rape kit. He's had no connection to Oklahoma at all. And which means he's done it before. I mean, and he had no arrest record ever. And so anyway, I started talking to the guy, and I said, "What are you doing?" He's bullshitting me as to what he's doing. And one of the things Douglas talks about in his books is once he began to interview these serial offenders in prison, and he would say, you probably had problems with your mother growing up. You don't relate to women. You go through all these things. These guys would just be like, "Wow, you can get inside my mind." And I'll tell you that thing I've used in basically interviewing people. It could be drug couriers. It could be a snitch. If you understand what someone's thinking, it's a lot easier to have a conversation with them. So I just kind of said, "Look, man, I know for a fact you are walking around here with this rape kit. I know it did just kind of happen. I'm not going to say you were doing anything, but you need to be honest with me. What's going on? You didn't do anything, but don't tell me you're just stretching your legs walking around with a rape kit." And then he starts just talking to me, and he said, "Well, I was looking for an opportunity, but I wouldn't do it." And I'm like, "Oh hell, he's going to freaking tell me this."
Well, that's the first lie. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but he tells me.
It's like saying, "I never inhaled." Well, that was enough. Yeah.
And so he says that. So I faked. I mean, it's like, holy crap, I didn't know this was going to happen. So I told him that I need to go tell the judge. I made up some excuse to step out, got a recorder, and I brought back in a file, and I had it in there so I could record everything he was saying. And he begins this long conversation about how he was 43 years old. Women never looked at him as a protector.
Quick question before you get into that, and it's actually a legal issue. Oklahoma, one-party consent state?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Are you under any, from a legal standpoint, were you under any obligation to do anything? I mean, you didn't have to tell them squat, right?
Correct. They can record him one-party consent fully. Well, we don't have any laws that restrict our recordings that they have in other states. We just comply with Title III in our federal law, which one-party consent's fine.
I just got that out there so people didn't think, hey, they use the word entrapment correctly and everything else,
Yeah. Oh, well, no one knows what entrapment is. And so we had this long conversation, and he begins to tell me how women have never viewed him as a protector. They don't like him. And he fantasizes.
And right there you go. What has he got? He's got a lot of sexual inadequacies that he's trying to compensate for.
And he told me, he said that he would never say rape. He would always call it forced sex. And he said he started to fantasize about forced sex because it seemed more real, because he never thought he'd ever have real sex. If he tried to pick up a hooker one time in Wichita, he couldn't get it up, and he said, "That's just par for the course for me." And so he'd always fantasize about forced sex. And
you know who that sounds like too?
About every sexual offender in Douglas writes about.
Well, you said Wichita, right? BTK, Dennis Rader.
Yeah, that's right. He's out of there. And so he goes through all this, and he tells me he even mentioned a swimming beach is actually in our district that he actually fantasized about abducting a girl from, but her mom was there when she kind of went up to the bathroom, but he didn't think he'd do it. He was just thinking about it because it's all fantasies. Well, again, he's going mobile, which means he's done that. So,
but just a second, it may be fantasy, but like you said, but he's got physical things that are right. I mean, he's got the rape kit, he's got the duct tape, he's got the gloves, he's got everything.
Yeah, he said it was a fantasy. That's bullshit. He was actually looking to go rape somebody. I mean, serial offenders are very patient. They wait for the right opportunity. And so, yeah, I mean, when I'm saying that's what he's saying, he's fantasizing about it, he wouldn't take, that was the complete BS. I mean, he got the equipment to do it. So, while this is going on, he had a little bit of weed on him. So we called a while we're just talking to him, they call the drug dog, find out where his truck is. They call the drug dog up there. It alerts while I'm talking to him. They do a search, find a little bit of weed, and the entire exact same rape kit in his truck that he had on him at that time.
Hey, now, did they ever find his vehicle that night when they arrested him?
They did not. No. They never knew where it was. So who knows how far he was walking to try to find that, but they never found his vehicle. And so they do that. I go to the judge, and so there's a crime in Oklahoma called carrying a weapon with intent to injure, which is a felony. And so I went and had somebody write out an affidavit, and we did a warrantless arrest on him to keep him in jail right there before it went back to Kansas for carrying a weapon with intent to injure, because we were going to...
Can you say which town in Kansas he was from?
Okay. At the time, he was living in his up on the Buffalo Ranch, wherever Turner's Buffalo Ranch was. But where he had first where he went to, he's from Ark City, actually.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely in southeast Kansas.
Yeah, which is north of us a little bit, and so now I don't think I knew that at the time. I learned it later. I don't think he ever upped. He was from the Ark City area. And so anyway, we do that, get him in jail. He's pissed, obviously, like, I don't care. He's pissed. Oh, and he had a speech impediment as well, which a lot of serial offenders will have a speech impediment. So we sent out a teletype to surrounding states of unsolved rapes involving tape with binding. That's on a Friday. This is probably like 4 or 5. It's like almost the courthouse is closed by this time Friday when this happens. And first thing Monday, a detective from Ark City, Kansas called our sheriff's office, who said, you can talk to this prosecutor, and just said, I have, and I'd recorded it. And so this detective said, hey, this sounds exactly like an unsolved sexual assault I've got. The guy broke in and raped the girl. He had a bandana on, put duct tape on her, wrapped her up in duct tape. And she pulled his bandana down during the assault and got a look at his face. And she looked at so many lineups, they couldn't, because he wasn't living in Ark City. And so he said, how does he talk? Do you hear anything in his voice? And I said, I've got it recorded, but I would just say he talks like Elmer Fudd. And so he said, well, my girl, who's more articulate than me, he said, well, my victim says that he can't say his R's when he was talking to her. And I go back and that's what it was. He goes, I walk onto Wanch, and that's kind of his speech impediment.
Be very, very quiet. We're hunting rabbits.
Right. And again, she said, I'm saying Elmer Fudd, and she's got can't say his R's. So they get the mugshot. They get the, I don't think actually that time DL photos are even all online that you have to send off for it. They get his mugshot. Send it up there. They do a photo lineup, and this girl had looked at lineups, dozens. Says, I'm gonna throw up. That's him, and pointed him right out. And so they walked through a warrant for the sexual assault on him, and extradited him up there, up into Kansas. Another thing I'll tell you, in his and I learned this from the detective that I've kept in contact with, and in his car, there were a lot of day passes. He was going to lakes and places where women and children were. He was kind of stalking, going around, looking at day passes at lakes and parks. Going in there, they found he was going like Walmarts. I think somewhere like in northwest Oklahoma. He had kind of picked some weird incidents. I don't know how they tracked him to Walmart. And so again, he's just one of those patient predatory sex offenders. So I ended up kind of emailing John Douglas and saying, hey, thanks, I appreciate it. And he called me back and said, hey, I want to talk to you. And so we had this long conversation about, because he's always fascinated why serial predators, because this guy told me he had a counselor, he never told anybody this. And I'm like, well, why are you telling me? I'm just kind of curious. And he said, well, no one's really kind of never asked. And I just, you've asked and I'll tell you about it. Because he was even seeing a therapist and had not mentioned any of these kind of proclivities that he had.
Was this guy on the radar anywhere? Had he been arrested or showed up anything?
No. In fact, I remember when Douglas called, he said, were there any kind of like nuisance crimes, breaking and entering? It's kind of the underwear theft stuff they do.
The precursor stuff.
Right. So he had not got any of those. So he'd evaded detection on all of those. No criminal history at all.
Do you know how many cases were able to tie to this guy? Just one, or were there more than one?
I know there was that one. I know there were multiple attempts of things he had done, but he's like a lot of predators. They kind of wait for the perfect opportunity. And I know there was something at a Walmart. I think it was like Woodward, which is in northwest Oklahoma. Some other things they'd done. We saw. I mean, he told me about this being at that swimming beach. And I know where this place, it's actually in our county. In fact, that's the lake he said he was fishing in whenever he was stretching his legs. That the beach is so much lower than where the parking lot is, just for the water level, and it's a big staircase, and you can't see the bathrooms from down there at the beach. And he told me he thought about if he could kidnap this young girl and fantasize about it, but I think her mom came up the stairs. He decided not to. So. They're just, again, there may be others, but I know that's the ones they had tied him on that. And
what was his, the outcome of his trial or conviction?
He was convicted. That was up there in Kansas. I don't know, Murph.
Well, it's public record, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What's his name?
Roger Hadorn, Hadorn.
Let's just hope he never gets out. And let's hope
I think he's gotten out, because I at one point I looked it up years later, and I think he was already out, and so I don't know.
Unbelievable.
He may be in. Roger Hugh Hadorn. He is a registered sex offender in Goeta Springs, Kansas. So, and also was living in Ark City.
Yeah, that's where he was from, Ark City, and I think his family was there, grew up. So that was kind of his comfort zone, where to start in. But I was going to tell you,
speaking of that, I pulled up. It's called the Z-Bar Ranch in Kansas. I didn't realize Ted Turner had that. It is a 42,000 acre property located in south central Kansas along the Salt Fork of the Arkansas. It's not Arkansas River, Murph. It's the Arkansas River when you're from Kansas.
The state's called Arkansas, so what are you talking about?
Yeah, there's a state called Arkansas. Yeah, the Z-Bar Ranch. I'll tell you, it's amazing. I didn't realize that was out there.
Yeah, and I'm surprised I thought Turner sold some of those. He had a few buffalo ranches. I don't know if he still owns it now.
You want to see where he's got, just real quick aside here, where it shows, this is the webpage, it pulled up. He's got 4 places in Argentina, 1 place in Kansas, 3 places in Montana, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places in Nebraska, 3 in New Mexico, and 2 in South Dakota.
That's why you can't find him anywhere. Hey, just to get back to this letter that you wrote to John Douglas, and then did he include his response in a book, the material you sent us?
So he called and asked if he could. He actually published it in an online article, and he was catching crap. I mean, Mindhunter wasn't that old when this happened. I mean, it might have been 8 years old or so, but he was catching crap from people saying, "Hey, you're telling trade secrets. This is sources and methods. You're going to let these people know how to evade that." And so he wanted to put this story in an article to say, "This is why if we arm police officers, citizens with knowledge, then this is what can happen." And he said, this guy read the book, and you could find that. So that was kind of his premise. And so,
yeah, but you glossed over one thing though out of that second rape kit, because this dude said he hasn't had sex in 20 years, but yet what did you find in the second rape kit?
Oh yeah, he had 2 condoms in his truck.
So why would you need condoms if you can't get it up?
And why would you need condoms if you said you will never have traditional sex? I mean, that's what he said. He said, "I know I'll never have sex."
Well, that's why you have the condoms. He'll never have traditional sex. He'll have forced sex, because the use of force is the only way he can get excited, and get his little rocks off.
Well, what I was getting to here is that in his summation after he posts your letter in here, he stresses 5 points that he's been trying to get across to investigators, and I love the fact that, this is all coming together. This is mostly common sense if you've been investigating crimes for a while, but it never hurts to have a refresher like this. And it's, you see something suspicious, follow it through. Be careful when you're conducting your investigations. Don't give up the information. They're supposed to tell you. You're not supposed to tell them anything. Don't let the suspect spook you, like you were talking about, seeing the photographs with the meat cleaver. And so, things like that. The 4th was, you got to be a good listener, and that's something Morgan needs to work on. We're working on, we're trying to get him counseling on that.
I'm a tremendous listener.
And then the fifth is sometimes you have to go beyond the call of duty. You've got to think, this is cliche to say it. You got to think outside the box because the criminals do. I love it. This is fantastic. All investigators should check all this out. If you're investigating crimes, you need to be aware of this.
And you were saying that too, Brian, you're working with interdiction units. One of the key things with interdiction units, when we started doing too, you got to look beyond the traffic stop. The traffic stop is only a reason for a contact. What's beyond the contact? And to your point, what's your purpose for being here? Largest cash seizure that I ever got, and it was the largest cash seizure in the state at the time, all came from I asked the guys just questions, what are you doing here? None of them got their story straight. None of them. In fact, one guy said, I'm here to visit my aunt. What's your aunt's name? Oh, I don't remember. I just know she's in the hospital. Gee, what a kind, caring, concerned, nephew you are.
Well, and that kind of goes back to, again, like Douglas's book on Anatomy of a Motive. If you say, you can ask about travel plans. What are you doing? And when you do thousands of traffic stops, you see what, you'll see the normal traffic patterns. And if someone's like, where are you going? Well, I'm just, I don't have a job. Okay, you're not employed? No. So what are you doing? I'm just taking a vacation. Like, really? Is that?
That makes sense.
How do you take a vacation with no job?
And you like, okay. Or the other thing is they give some, and they've got good tricks. I mean, I'm, just like the one of the people saying, oh, I lay tile. Like, can I see your hands? They got these nice manicured soft hands. Like, dude, you are not a freaking laborer. I mean, they always say they're in construction, and so but that's just knowing that you don't do something for no reason. And if you understand what somebody's doing, and so and look, I've always loved interviews. That's probably been the thing I enjoy the most. If we did operations, I would ask to do. He's my deal. I'd say, look, can you do search? I'm going to talk to the guy. I think that's so important. But there was. And I was actually still an agency attorney at the time. I wasn't yet an investigator in this. I don't know. It was an interdiction stop. I don't know, $20,000. It's almost nothing. I mean, it's a small amount, but clearly drug money, which is funny. Those are the ones people fight over. Not, $500,000. Oh, that's not mine in the trunk of the car.
Don't know how
but you
got
get the smaller amounts, which I think that's probably because people are more amateur, or they may have, so that may actually be part of their money, but those are the ones we kind of fight over. But this guy was just saying, that's my money and you guys are racial profiling me, and wouldn't give it up. And they said, like, I don't know. And so I just went in there and I just sat down before we cut the guy loose. And I said, and again, it's just back to that, if you understand what they're doing. And I just said, look, dude, I don't want you to say anything. I know what you're doing. That you're thinking to yourself that when you go report to them the money got taken, they're going to say you pinched it, you stole it. They're going to threaten your family. These guys do this all the time. We're going to give you a receipt. I'll give you, you can have my card, and we're going to give you a receipt. And when you show them that you actually didn't steal the money and you got taken loose, and they're going to see that like a forfeiture case is filed, they'll know you didn't rat them out. And so he just like his eyes started watering. He goes, I think they're going to kill my family. And I said, I get that, man, but here's the thing. I know you're just hired. I know you're not a total shitbag that does this all the time. That's why you're freaking scared and acting like a fool and telling this stupid ass story. A pro doesn't do that. And I get that. And so he said, yes, sir, I'll sign it. And so, I walk through how that'll happen being a courier. And then and again, it's just understanding what they're thinking. And if you do that, tell them what that is, and then then you can also understand why they're acting the way they're doing. Then that's I think that is one of the most beneficial. That's whether you're kind of talking to an informant. I mean, all the guys I know, they're good at interviewing. They don't do this kind of movie coming in hot. No,
that's what we've always said. You don't get somebody. Look, you've done death penalty cases, right? You don't get admissions in death penalty cases by telling, give me that information or you're going to get the needle. So if I tell you I'm going to get the needle, I mean, please, it's like you say the movie stuff, but it goes back to point number 2: conduct interrogations carefully. You don't beat it out of people, but the point about it is what you did is, he had a need to tell the truth. He just didn't know how to tell the truth. And you gave him a way, A, to save face, B, not really admit anything, but at the same time, he did admit it. And C, you created a very strong forfeiture case because he gave you admissions against interest. They're going to kill me. By the way, if you were like top tier, you wouldn't be running 20,000. This was a training run.
Well, and that's just where, again, telling him, say, look, and it's to put him at ease, but it's accurate. Say, look, dude, I know you're not a big time international interstate drug runner, and because of two things. One, this money ain't shit. And number two, if you were, you wouldn't be driving. You're the broke dick dumbass they have to do this. So I
were those,
get that.
Were those your exact words, Brian?
Probably so. I mean, and again, not being disrespectful, but you know how it is. You tell them that.
You got to call it.
And you do that. And so, and again, if you respect them and then it's like almost like he's relieved, like, you guys know I'm not some major trafficker, and understanding that's, I'll tell you, like with Hadorn, I mean, he had never told and once he began to talk, he had never told anybody how it felt to be him, and so I say enjoyed. He was certainly comfortable and wanted to keep talking about his whole life. Women don't like me, and it wasn't like he was like, just getting upset doing that. It was a very calm, like, I don't think anyone had ever talked to him. And so again, this guy had victimized this young lady looking to do it to anybody. He would kidnap a young girl and do that if he could get away with it. So I have to feign understanding and respect to him, because no one had ever done that to him ever. And like I said, he was very pissed when I said, "Look, dude, you're going to jail." And I didn't like a transition, like went and just said, "Hey, you freaking child, you raping piece of shit." I mean, again, he'd been respectful. He hadn't been, and so I just was matter of fact. He was upset, I think, because he said, "I've been telling you this, and now you're putting me in jail." But that he never had a chance to talk to somebody. And I guarantee you guys have seen that, Steve. When it's like when you're talking to an informant. If they're trying to tell you, "Hey, I'm not that bad a guy," like, okay, stop, cut the shit, okay, dude. If you don't know big dope dealers, you're of no use. Your information is your currency. So, and then you kind of see them break and like, okay, and then they get excited, start talking and doing this, but they have to be relaxed, and you have to say, and again, it's just calling their crap, saying, "Dude, you are trying to convince me you are not a major player." Okay, number one, people have lied to me my whole career. Number two, you understand, if you don't know anybody, you ain't worth a shit to us. So why don't you just relax, start over, let's tell the truth, and then you'll help yourself out, man. That's what we're trying to do, is put you in a position where you can do this, because there are people worse than you, and that just seems to work.
And this is exactly, this sounds almost like the car salesman. Help me help you. What do I have to do to put you into this car today? But that's exactly what you're doing. By the way, I misspoke earlier. I said William Ressler. I meant Roy Hazelwood, because I'm looking over at the books right here. Dark Dreams, Roy Hazelwood and Stephen McDonald or Michaud. It was a guy who co-wrote it with him, because right below that I have the Manhunters book. Right below that I have the Geographical Profiling by Kim Rosso. I'm sorry, Roy Hazelwood really kind of did the whole thing around sexual stuff. So hey, but that's a great way to bring this to a close. So sorry about that. I almost made it sound like it's a closing argument for a case. Now that brings that case to a close. So we've had rebuttal, rebuttal, or whatever they call it now. And so the case in chief is over, right? But that's Murph and I we're talking during a break. It's like, this is good stuff, because I think what you did too is you approached it, number one, from a factual standpoint. So you took the emotion out of it. You said, here's the study by BJS, Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is part of the Department of Justice. I actually used BJS statistics when I did some work on the sniper case and showing how many people had contact, etc. A lot of good stuff comes from out of them. But it's also the practical, Midwest people, it's kind of, you got to be practical. There's no fancy stuff. It's just like, you do what works, you quit doing what doesn't work. But the whole thing about, we're going to talk about this too, about the drug, the legalization of marijuana and stuff. So we're going to get into all of that. But we just had, during our break, right? You guys probably don't even know when we broke. Maybe you did. We had Wayne Stinnett in here, who was the person responsible for getting us introduced to you and some other folks. And he just cornered you about something. And then you made an interesting tie-in, because the next case we want to talk about is a kidnapping story that he was involved with. But before we get there, now, where did this kidnapping case happen? During your 8 years there, or after you went and became an agent?
No, this was when I was an agent, and then when I was actually assigned in Tulsa.
So before we get there, then let's kind of set the stage. So you did this for 8 years. What made you decide to say, hey, look, I like being a lawyer, but I want to be a real cop now?
So at that time, I've been a drug prosecutor. And there's not a lot of people that do drug prosecution. So I got to know the people at the State Narcotics Bureau and the general counsel.
What do you mean? Why were there not a lot of people to do it? Just simply because there's not enough people, or not enough people were interested?
I would just say that there's just a handful of people that are full-time drug prosecutors. I mean, there's just not that many in Oklahoma. And I was involved with our state association. I was teaching there. And so the director and then general counsel asked me to come work at the bureau in the legal division, which is a different step. I mean, I went from a task force of like 5 to a task force of 65, and then we had a wiretap unit. So I was the supervising attorney on wires, and just kind of that next thing to do. So I was in the bureau in the legal division for 3 years. Moved to Oklahoma City. And,
hey, quick question. You said you did wires.
Yeah.
And Murph will appreciate this. Would you rather do wires at the state level or wires at the federal level?
State level.
Damn right.
Yeah. If nothing else, we don't have to have approval at D.C. To go up. So, we at one time had an assistant DA that was involved in some stuff. And, we walked a wiretap through, my boss and I, and drafted the app order affidavit, called the presiding judge to the appellate court. The attorney general has to sign off on it. We got that done in 48 hours to go up on a wire.
In 48 hours, more for those guys they wouldn't even be done collecting documentation.
Oh, we can even write the affidavit.
Hey players, that is the end of part 1. Part 2 comes out, as always, on Tuesday. In the meantime, go check us out at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, go check out our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including our book list. Any book written by our guests will be listed there. In the meantime, go check us out also, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. It's where we put a lot more content you won't hear on our regular podcast. We go into a lot more topics, and folks, it is a lot of fun. So go check us out, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.